a little bit more about master pages, we're going to talk about how to create imagery, more specifically on how to create imagery for the master page. So here is my document. I have it split up into individual layers here. Images, text. This is where my image is going to go. This is the red boxes is where my text is going to go. I have my 4-column grid set up in case I want to use some sort of different grid system. But if I go into my pages panel right here, you'll notice I have 5 pages here. They're all basically the same, and of course my A master up here, which we just talked about. I'm going to double click on my A master, which is going to bring up my A master spread. Everything that I apply to the left master page will apply to all the even number pages. Everything I apply to the right master page will apply to all the odd pages. For example, let's say we wanted to put some sort of an image in here that was a paper texture. First of all, what we're going to want to do is if we're going to have a paper texture, we're going to want a bleed to go all the way to the edge. Typically you would set up a bleed when you set up your document at the beginning, but here I didn't do that. So I can go to File, Document Setup. Okay? And as you can see, if it doesn't say more options or fewer options, you can click on this and it opens up my bleed. Typically you want a 0.125 inch bleed. Now because I have my chain linked here, if I hit tab it will apply the same bleed all the way around. So I'm just going to hit tab. And you can see it converted it to picas, but that's the same thing as 0.125 inch. Right now my document is set up to work in picas. If I click OK, you'll see now I have a bleed. So I'm just going to make myself a great big text box, text frame here that covers the distance of my bleed. I don't need it in the center because it's going to connect together and this is actually the spine. So here's my image frame. I'm going to import an image by selecting File, Place, find my image, and let's say we want to use this paper texture right here. Okay, and it puts it in there. I select my image, I want to center it, and I want to fit the content to the frame proportionally. I don't want to skew it. Okay, now you can see it's obviously a little bit taller than wide. I don't want this extra space here. Now with a paper texture, viewers are not going to notice if you skew it slightly. So I'm going to grab my direct selection tool and select this image right here, and I'm just going to stretch it out to the edges of my bleed. You will notice on my other pages, if I go to page 2 here, double click on it, this is page 2, page 4, it applies to all of my pages on the left hand side or all of my even pages. If I go back into A master, you have to be careful with background textures because they can be very, very distracting and dominating. And if you put text on top of it, sometimes it's hard to read. Do not add text here because I am on the A master and it will apply to all my pages. You need to be careful and deselect the A master before you start making any changes because it will apply to all pages. If I go back to my A master, I'm going to select this guy right here. I don't want this to be quite as dominating as it is. So up here in your options panel, you'll notice right here I have an opacity. Okay, I can drop it with this little scroller here, or I can just type in, let's say 25%. I'm going to hit return. That's a little too low. Let's do 50%. Okay, that's about right. I'm going to go ahead and select this, hold Option and copy it straight across, hold Shift to constrain. Now I have my paper texture all the way throughout. If I hit W so I can see it in preview mode, that's what it's going to print like. So that's just one way that you can add a static image or a paper texture or a background image to your A masters. Let's say we want to try something else. I'm going to go back to my A master, go out of preview mode, select these 2 boxes and delete it. Let's say that I want a logo in the bottom right hand corner of all of my odd number pages, just right down here. So I'm going to select my text box and put a logo right here. I want it to be up exactly 1 pica and over 1 pica from my margin. So you'll notice here we have our X and Y coordinates. If I click up, it's going to move. So I want it to go to the left 1 pica. So I'm going to put -1p and it will do the math for me. As you can see, it moved over 1 pica. If I click this, this is my height and width of my box. This is my XY coordinates. If I click up here, you can notice it's going down a little bit. Okay, I want it 1 pica above my bottom margin, so I'm going to add -1p. If I were to put +1p, it would go down, minus goes up. If I hit tab, now it's indented 1 pica from my margin. Okay, let's say I want to place a logo in there. I'm making a newsletter for the Toronto Raptors. File, place, desktop, Toronto Raptors, and double click. It's going to place it in there. Now you'll notice you can't see anything because the image is so big. If I grab my direct selection tool, click on the image, let's zoom out a little bit. There's my image. Double click my hand tool. Remember, whenever you're printing something, you want images that are 300 dpi or higher. If you're working with the web, 72 dpi works just fine. So I'm going to select this box. I'm going to say I want my image to be centered, and I want to fit my content proportionately. Deselect it, W to go into preview mode, and this is what it looks like. And you'll notice if I double click on page number 1, it's in the bottom corner. Page number 3, page number 5, etc. Go back into my A master, just like with a header or a footer. Another thing I may want to do is I may want to put some sort of a watermark on my pages. Let's go back into my A master. I'm going to hold shift because this is pretty much a perfect square. I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to make a text box that's a square. Leave preview mode. Okay, and we're going to put that pretty much right in the center. File, place, desktop, Toronto Raptors. Now if I were to select this image and go into my info panel, it will tell me all of the information about this image. This is actually a 72 dpi image, so it's probably, and it's a CompuServe GIF, indexed RGB. If I were working to print this in CMYK, this would not be a good image to use. I can convert it to CMYK, but sometimes that's going to cause problems. And this resolution is way too low for print. This is good for web, but not for print. So I'd probably want to find a higher resolution image. It probably works okay here at this size, but not at this size. You can see already that it's not that great a quality. But for this illustration, it will work just fine. I select my image, center it, and fit content proportionately. Now you'll notice the tail over here makes it almost look a little bit off-center. It's centered, but because this tail goes over here, it doesn't look centered. So I'm actually going to move this over a little bit. It's off-centered, but I'm going to use these lines to center this circle area back here. So I'm saying that looks a little bit more center, even though it's not perfectly. Hit W to see my preview mode. Now you'll notice on pages 3 and 4 it shows up. However, again, this is way too dominating. So I'm going to select this image. Let's put it at 10%. Click in here, make a text box. Fill it with placeholder text. You can see it's just very subtle in the background. Preview mode, that's kind of what it's going to look like. So this is how you apply static images to all of your pages and to your master page, and how you create imagery to use throughout your document.